Our second panel today is looking ahead at the challenges and opportunities for agricultural conservation. And we have another excellent panel with us today. And our panel this afternoon is moderated by Sara Wyant. She's a veteran farm policy reporter who has, she's done it all, and she's had lots of...
She's still here. And still doing it all.
Including serving on CTIC's board of directors, and we're so proud to have the association with Sara, and she continues to be a great friend of CTIC. So I'll turn it over to Sara. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you to CTIC, and thanks to all of you for showing up for this wonderful 30th anniversary celebration. And it's just been great to look around the crowd, see people, and Dick and Chick, I haven't seen you for a long time from when you were guiding me around CTIC meetings and teaching me the subject matter and how things work. And just our previous panel was just fantastic, weren't they? Just really good session that we had. And so it's a tough act to follow. But you know, Neil did his best, Bob Schieffer. And I just want to point out that you'll notice our session is called Looking Ahead, Challenges and Opportunities for Agricultural Conservation. It's not called Forward. And I am not Candy Crowley. So let's just set that straight. We have our own distinguished panel this afternoon, starting with on the my far left, Fred Luckey, who is chairman of Field to Market. Many of you have talked to Fred about the Keystone Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, and he's also a retired executive vice president of Bunge for North America. So Fred, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Next to him is Dan DeSutter. Dan's a longtime conservationist from Attica, Indiana, and I understand that he has been doing free grass-fed beef before it was cool, and has been a pioneer in a lot of markets in agriculture. And so welcome to you, Dan. Next, Larry Clemens, the Nature Conservancy's Assistant State Director for Conservation Programs in Indiana, also a CTIC board member. And we kind of got this Indiana thing going over here, you notice. It's kind of heavy here on the board. But Larry's familiar not only with agriculture in the Midwest, but in Brazil, and he's going to share some of his insights on that. Next, Jerry Hatfield, the director of USDA's Agricultural Research Services National Laboratory for Agriculture and the Environment. Great title. And also a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a Kansas native. So we're mixing it up a little here in the Midwest, but then back to an Indiana native who really needs no introduction in this format, because Jim Moseley has been at the forefront of not only conservation efforts, but leadership in Washington, D.C., as an advisor to the administrator at the Environmental Protection Agency and as deputy secretary at USDA. Currently one of 4 board members on the Agri Foundation. So we're happy to have all of them with us. Please welcome them to our panel. Now, Neil and I also didn't compare notes on this, but just in talking, we thought we'd mix up the questions, and we happened to pick technology as our first question as well. And I think it's been amazing to see the progress that's been made over the last 30 years. Certainly, you know, from the time I started writing about agriculture and policy in 1980 and growing up on a farm in eastern Iowa, amazing changes that I've witnessed just in my lifetime. But I want to know what's on the horizon. We're celebrating 30 years of Conservation Technology Information Center here today. What are we going to be celebrating at the 50-year mark? And Jerry, I'd like to start with you. What are we seeing and what's on the horizon for conservation technology?
I thought the first panel was going to steal all of my lines that I put together, but I'm going to put a different spin on it because we are in a rapid age of technology. You look at what we've come through in the last 10 years and even the last 5 years. We talk about GPS. We control things to 1 centimeter level. We map fields at a ½ centimeter in terms of height. We have all of these different pieces of technology. But as we take this forward, what I'm seeing is that maybe we'll figure out how to put all those pieces together. We have a lot of different pieces, but I'm not sure we've made a good whole system out of it yet. How do we bring that together? I mean, if you take a look at this, and one of my favorite things to look at with producers is that we have yield mapping technology, we got GPS technology, we got GIS technology, we can throw all those maps in there, but we haven't figured out how to take all of that data and really make it information yet. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, what we're going to see is how do we put that into information so it can go back to Jane's comment that she made earlier, is how do we really build a system for continuous improvement? How do we really put it together so that what we learn from this season helps us for next season, and how do we plan forward and we get this rolling set of information so that we really do understand how to bring this together? But I think there's a piece of technology that will come out in the next few years that we haven't imagined yet, and that is the whole idea of robotic technology. I think we're going to see that GPS technology put into things in which we've got robotic tractors in the field. We've got a lot of other pieces. Drones, will become part of our life, but I think not from a spying point of view, but in actuality a monitoring point of view. How do we take that and fly over fields and understand what's going on in different parts of that fields so we can build very rapid remedial corrections in terms of what happened. So we don't have to go in and just spray the whole field. We'll be able to understand it, monitor it, but also evaluate what's going on in the soil as well. I think there's just some exciting things that are going to happen, but it's going to be not a lot of new technology, but how do we really take that technology and do something very, very useful with it and very, very practical for producers.
Some cool stuff on the way. Dan, have you seen some of these new things emerging on your farm? Are you ready for the robotics?
Anything that gets me out of a tractor seat when I'm ready to get out at the end of the day would be great. I've been accused of being a techno junkie at times, and I've hung more gadgets in my tractor cab than I care to think of at this point. And I think remote sensing and some of the things that Jerry's talking about are going to be wonderful. But the biggest one that I see, and I don't know if you call it a technology, but I'm going to call it the biological revolution. I think that coming to grips and understanding soil biology, how to make that work for us instead of some of the things we've done in the past that have maybe made it work against us, will be the thing that can help us move forward in terms of our productivity. And it'll certainly be aided by all the wonderful technology yet to come, which I wouldn't want to even try to predict yet. But I really think helping farmers and practitioners and educators understand that we're managing a biological system will take us to a new level.
That kind of begs to Jane's point that she raised, but how do we realize the potential, not only of what's there now, and bring it together to be more useful? Other comments on technology as you see it advancing, Larry?
Yeah, there's a lot of scientists working on this right now with technology and conservation. Many of the major Conservancy scientists are working on this to where we can, I think now with the technologies we have, the understanding of the conservation practices, become a little bit more precise with our application of conservation and be targeted about how we're doing our work. We all understand we have less dollars to work with at the state and federal level, but if we can figure out where is that filter strip going to be the most effective, where is that grass waterway, where are those conservation practices going to be, and the technology there to help farmers and land managers make better decisions, and if we can couple that conservation decision support technology with some of the decision support tools that industry is creating for agronomic reasons on yield improvements and improvements in that way, it could be a really nice package into the future. And I'd like to think in 30 years we have that type of package available to where we can really be efficient with our conservation dollars and where we apply it out on the land.
Mm-hmm. Jim, did you want to add to that?
I see the sensor technology that will come as revolutionizing another phase of of what we do in agriculture, and I don't think we've come close to the real potential in terms of at the nano level of what we can do with sensors. There's another element of this, though, that I find fascinating. I'm going to go to the public policy side of this for just a second, and that is all the things we're doing on the farm to collect the data and really write the recipe for how we produce literally on a foot-by-foot basis now. Very small metric. That's all interesting. It's valuable. It's going to help us farmers in a major way. Let's step back from that for a moment, and let's look at, as we consider the macro issues and the macro watershed, the effects, the ability of new technology now to actually do sensing for us in terms of what's happening at the Gulf of Mexico or the Chesapeake Bay, and move all the way back up the watershed to the micro level. Ultimately, folks, and I'm going to bring up the whole issue of those people who are doing a great job in agriculture and those who are not doing so well. We're going to have to figure out a way, if we're going to maintain credibility with the public, to allow individuals to select themselves into those two groups. And I prefer a self-selection if possible. But the point is that we're not going to know where the real problems are coming from the Gulf of Mexico until we continue to work our way back upstream and actually come to the micro watershed. And my sense is that we are going to be able, and are probably very close to it now, capable of developing the sensor technology that's automated. So we're not sending out people to pull samples and tests in a very cost prohibitive way, but that we can do some technology out there at the micro watershed level that allows us to begin to assess where is the real problem at here. And once we do that, then we add another dynamic in terms of how we make improvements in agriculture. And really what I'm trying to do is to point out there's an awful lot of good things that are happening, and we can demonstrate it at the farm level, but somehow we have to be able to demonstrate it off of the farm level as well. And I want to be able to try to accomplish that. And I think we're at least at the beginning of being able to do that. The second thing I would bring up is that, and it was mentioned in the earlier panel, is this whole issue of communication technology and what's happening here. Think about the ability that we have today to go to our own farm office and sit down and just begin to scan for information on issues and problems. And the ability, and of course our youngsters, they don't go to a farm office, they just pull out their phone and they do it. But the ability we now have to access information and turn that information into knowledge, to me, accelerates the potential for us to do much better than what we are, if we choose to do so.
Brad, you're in the business of collecting a lot of this data. What new technology are you seeing on the horizon, or perhaps would you like to see developed in order to do a better job?
I think that's a fair question, would like to see. I'm not the one that you would ask that question to on a daily basis, technology. That is not my forte. Having said that, if you're involved in this subject around sustainability and how we're going to deal with the future, it's an inescapable solution. It's part of the solution. What is the best way forward? I don't have a clue what is going to offer the greatest hope. I've heard a lot of wonderful ideas here. I do very much embrace the remote sensing concept because many of the locations, this is a multi-national, global issue. This is not just confined to North America. And we're going to have to be able to gather data in areas that are not traditionally accessible. I think that is critical. I think water is going to be our largest single challenge in how we utilize water. That's going to get into a political discussion as well. because water in and of itself is not treated in the same economic light as, say, oil is. We all know that we don't view it the same way. This concept of running it back to its origins. Nobody wants to spend money unnecessarily. So input management is crucial. I think I have, over 37 years now, understand a little bit about why we put as much nitrogen down and the reasons we do it, and the risk we take if we don't put down enough or we put down too much. And then that turns into watershed issues elsewhere. And it's taking this data and somehow getting, I think this is Jim's point, real-time data that gives us real-time feedback as to how to respond. Just-in-time delivery of inputs and maximization of the amount of water we have. And then I should say, and this is a little off topic maybe, but how we translate into getting the most out of what we have as opposed to just getting the most until the day as we run out of what we had. And so I think it's a data issue. I think it's a data gathering issue, and then I think it's translating it at real time into action. And that I'm encouraged. And lastly, I would say it's technology transfer. I remember years ago, many years ago, when I first started going down to South America, and we were all just started fumbling around with our big, bulky cell phones. And these folks in these developing world were already using cell phones. I felt rather silly that we were so behind the curve, but it was because the technology was easily transferred and they didn't have to invest in the infrastructure. And this can't be a totally competitive thing. We have to transfer these technologies because this is a global food shortage problem, and we all know what the consequences are if there's unrest in other parts of the world. We've got evidence of that. So I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I want to remind the audience as well, if you have questions, either write them down and we'll come and call on you as our discussion evolves here. So please feel free to interact when you have something that's a burning question for one of our panelists on this. I'd like to turn to a more broader question. So we've addressed some of the technology and the opportunities there, also as a challenge because we don't have some of the tools and the systems to put them all together. But I just came from the World Food Prize last week in Des Moines, where the talking point about trying to feed 9 billion or so people by 2050 was repeated on and on about all these different things that we need to do in order to address that challenge ahead. So Larry, I'd like to turn to you a little bit, both in the U.S. and around the globe. What really do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for conservation looking ahead?
Someone on the previous panel mentioned the notion of sustainable intensification. And I think those two words, sustainable intensification, are big challenges for us. We certainly get that we've got to grow more food per acre in this world. We also get that it's probably going to take more acres in production to meet those demands. But somehow the conservation community, the entire world community needs to come together and figure out how do we do that sustainably? How can we grow our food? How can we reach 300 bushels per acre corn and yet still reduce the Gulf of Mexico dead zone or other dead zones around the world? There's hundreds. And so we have to do this in a way that's sustainable. And at the same time, I think a big conservation challenge for us as we think about the next 30 or 40 years is where is the appropriate places to develop agriculture and yet leave some ecosystem still intact so that the services that ecosystem provides to agriculture and the entire world can function and we can still have a healthy planet. So, sort of big picture, but those are some really big challenges that we have to get at, I think, as a global society. And North America, I think we certainly have to try to lead that.
And do you see CTIC playing a role more globally?
I think so. More and more it seems like we're talking about international events that we are working on. And certainly this model, and I have to go back 30 years in the early 80s when CTIC was developing. I was just coming out of college working at a Solon Water District and remember CTIC being developed, and so I've been very good friends with Jim Lake. This notion of public-private partnerships, you know, it's a model that is exportable around the world. And I see it when I've worked in Brazil, where you have the public-private partnerships going on there. And, you know, it's certainly a model that we need to export.
Jerry?
Yeah, I think that as we think about feeding 9 billion people and the amount of food that it takes to do that, there's some very sobering parts of this puzzle. And it goes back to Frank's comment about water, is to grow 300 bushel corn from where we're at today will take another 5 inches of water transpired through that plant. Extra yield does not come free. So it's going to take more water, and Jane mentioned it in the last panel, and I'll bring it up as well, is that we also are now going to move into a period of greatly unsettled weather around the world. Climate variability, or climate change, over the next 10 to 20 years is going to wreak havoc with how we thought about managing soil. We're going to have extreme events of temperature, or extreme events of rainfall, and if our soil doesn't have the capacity to absorb that water, hold that water, make it available, we're going to see more and more food insecurity around the world than what we've had. Now, I get accused of being very pessimistic and delivering a doomsday talk, but I think we have to face reality. But what it really comes back to in all of this is we need to be paying very strict attention to building the soil resource. We have to build the soil resource in terms of organic matter, the soil biology, all of those pieces, because the future of humankind depends upon us stabilizing the soil resource. And the other sobering statistic, if you look around the world, we're still in a degradation slope of soil. We continue to degrade our soil resources. So we're going to have to reverse a very big trend in terms of managing our soils better, improving that. It'll solve a lot of our problems in terms of not only production but some of the environmental quality issues. But we're going to have to really rethink how we do this. And I'll just, one of the examples that I think about for Africa is that, you know, we would like the African producer to improve organic matter, but in reality, the residue that's left on that, the manure that comes from that, is their fuel source. Would we be better off providing them fuel oil for cooking so that the residue could remain for going back into the soil? I mean, we're going to have to rethink everything because I think we're going to, but I don't think we'll rethink those until we really hit some very crisis moments of just how we're going to do this.
Well, we're certainly investing a lot of money in Africa and other less developed countries trying to figure these things out. But do any of you have a sense that there's a coordinated, comprehensive effort to do so? Dan, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, on the technology of how to produce, my sense is that Gates Foundation, for example, has made a major effort in this arena, and other foundations as well. And in that regard, I think that we're delivering fairly well. It is important to understand, and I would preface my comment by, and it's not egotistical, North American farmers are still the best, the most productive farmers in the world. But you can't take a North American system and lay it over a developing country. It's impossible. It doesn't work. But there are certain key things that we can go and teach, and the kind of things that Jerry's talking about in terms of soil health. This is something that I feel fairly passionately about, that the United States here, because of our presence in the world and because of the strength that we have in our agricultural industry, could be a significant world leader. I don't believe that we need to do it completely alone, but we could be a significant world leader in terms of things like improving soil health. As Jerry pointed out, we are still even degrading soils here in the United States, so we've got our own work to do. And we can get at that, and we must get at that. But clearly, there's things that we know, we understand, we have the research, the scientists and so forth, we have the technology that we can help deliver to those developing countries that would fairly significantly change the soil profile. And we have to understand that man only survives, I think Earl Butz said that man is here because of 6 inches of topsoil spread evenly around the world. And the fact is that it's true, and if we don't take care of this resource that we frankly, in the U.S. government, we've talked about air quality, we talk about water quality, we have not historically talked about soil quality. And yet, soil quality is measurable. And if we do soil quality well, air quality and water quality is enhanced by definition. So there's some real opportunities here, and it seems to me that the United States, this is one area where we could really lead.
I'm going to let Dan respond, and then we've got a question over here if we have a microphone. Dan?
Well, everyone in this room, I'm sure, would agree that our soil is one of our nation's greatest resources, and in fact, one of the planet's greatest resources. And yet, the degradation we've referred to, and we're all people who are here because we're passionate about saving that soil resource and improving it, yet, as Jerry mentioned, we've watched the quality of our resource in this country degrade over the last 50 to 100 years. In our neighborhood, the first farm that my wife and I bought when we started farming, soil organic matter on that farm was around a little under 2%. If you went to the fence row and took a probe out of there and tested that, you'd find that what I would call the equilibrium or natural state of that soil should be around 6 to 7%. In a relatively short amount of time, we've degraded that. And I'm not going to go into all the reasons why that's important, but the good news is, as Jim just mentioned, that when you start to focus on organic matter as your metric and the goal, it's measurable. So we can put real values on the effort to improve it. In our case, 18 years of no-till corn and beans, this is before we got heavily into using cover crops manure, we were able to double that organic matter back up to 4%. Why is that important, and how is it that we're going to get mainstream farmers to accept this as a goal? Well, we know that for every 1% of organic matter in the top 12 inches, there's 1,000 pounds of nitrogen. And in a typical year, we'll mineralize naturally 3 to 5% of that. So, 2 to 4%. So at 3%, that 2% organic matter that we've picked up in 18 years, which is a short time in the soil's life, at current nitrogen prices is worth $40 to $50 a year in inputs that we don't have to go off farm and buy and risk running down the tile lines. That 2% organic matter allows us to store an extra 32,000 gallons of water, gallons of water per acre. That's equivalent to 1.25 inches rainfall roughly, which this year in August was worth quite a bit. These are real numbers, and the previous speaker, and I got nervous because I thought steal my thunder here, but this is something we can go out to landowners, and an increasingly large percentage of the land in this country today is owned by people that have no physical connection to it, and this can be a problem, or in this case it may be an advantage, because you know what, I can probably sit down with a room full of folks, the farm club wives of Chicago, and explain organic matter and why it's important on our farm, how it'll add value to their farm, and they'll get it quicker than a group of farmers. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but there are a lot of folks out there with preconceived notions that just aren't open to that. And so I think if we can focus on organic matter, all these other win-wins come in: water quality, air quality, reduced need of outside inputs, all comes together, and I think really if there's one thing we could accomplish over the next 20 years, both domestically and globally, it's to educate the world as to the value of organic matter in our soils and how to maximize it.
And set a national goal for improving soil quality. Just put the metrics in writing and do it. We set other goals, and this is one that, frankly, the agricultural community can take upon itself and win in a major way.
Good point. I want to come back to the importance of educating people about this goal and how we might do that, but we have a question here. And Rob, can you please identify yourself?
Yes, Rob Myers with the USDA Sustainable Agriculture Program and agronomist at the University of Missouri. So Dan, I just wanted to pick up on your comment about biological solutions. I sit on our state NRCS technical committee and have for a decade, and I've seen them move towards a focus on using bulldozers for terracing to having more biological solutions. Could you say a little bit more about what opportunities you see with cover crops or other approaches? And Jerry, you might want to pick up on this too, given the research your lab does. Thank you.
Sure. Well, Bruce, I think it was mentioned earlier, we need to bring livestock back to the farm. And while I agree that that brings many opportunities, I would submit that we already have livestock on our farm. We just don't acknowledge it. The microbes are the livestock of the soil. They're what takes what's in that environment, breaks it down, and feeds the plant. So our focus is when I talk about biology, is based on providing a good atmosphere for those microbes. You hear corporate creeds based around making a good workplace for employees. We feel the same way about our microbes. So you talk about technology, the first thing is most microbial populations need oxygen, which means they want an aerobic environment, which means we have to provide proper drainage solutions in order that they can have oxygen throughout the year. The good news is we have wonderful new technology to do that. We can now go out and do a topo survey of a field and design drainage systems on the desktop. I can proofread them. I'm not the guy that installs them, but I can check every line to make sure it's where I want, the right slope, right size, before I hand him that card to go out and do it. Why is that important? Well, if we're going to have an active biological system, they've got to be able to breathe. And so that, in most of our soils, and this is not a one-size-fits-all thing, but in most of our soils, that's the first step to getting active biology. And then, of course, we want to have something growing all the time. Whenever something's not growing, the microbes are starving or they're wanting for something. So corn and beans really only actively grow roots and feed that rhizosphere for about 3 months of the year. The sun is our free resource, and we waste it 9 months of the year when we could have it feeding a plant, which is in turn feeding our livestock in the soil and putting carbon back in the soil. So that's probably the second thing we're really working on in conjunction with our cash crops. And unlike every other farmer, I have to pay a competitive cash rent or make my land payments. So, this is not done being divorced from the reality of economics. In fact, though, what we found is it becomes a win-win. That when you start to do these things and develop a healthy soil, a biologically active soil, economics proves favorable in a number of ways. So drainage, providing something active biologically to be going on there all the time that we can in our part of the world in Indiana. We realize stuff's not going to grow 365 days a year. We can get closer than you might think. And then you've got your fertility, and as Jerry and I were discussing, I love manure for that reason. We try to use manure as our primary fertility source whenever possible. That may not be possible for everyone, but those are some of the things that we're doing on our farm to encourage biological activity and diversity.
Jim and Jerry?
Okay. Dan, you just gave a dissertation that, frankly, a lot of farmers wouldn't be able to do. And I think, to your great credit, how did you, and I also know that you didn't come up through the, quote, agricultural colleges of this great land. So someplace along the line, you learned some things. I think this is important in terms of us looking forward. Sorry to take your job for a second, Sarah, but I'm going to ask the question, how did that happen in your circumstance? I know the answer, okay? But I'm curious, and I think it's important for Dan to share how he came to that level of knowledge and understanding, because this is essential.
A good lawyer or moderator never asks the question they don't already know the answer to. Well, I didn't leave the farm thinking I was going to come back. I studied finance, and I won't bore you with the whole story of how we ended up where we are, but I think the number one thing that's helped me is I came back ignorant, without preconceived notions, and with an eye towards numbers and science, that if I had a problem, I sought information as solutions. And those information sources have changed a lot, even in my short time. The initial source was a man that we both revere, David Swain, who is our agronomist. And David had a real eye towards all the things we're here to discuss. And the network of his customers that he established and put us in touch with through usually biannual meetings was initially probably the best resource that we had. Another network that I was able to tap into was Jim Kinsella. I think one of the farm magazines put on a contest to transition to no-till, and I wrote an essay and was invited to join. And that group, which Mr. Hatfield had a large influence on the thinking of, was instrumental in helping me start to think about how to manage what's going on below the ground. Most farmers manage on what they see above the ground, and Jim was the first one that really got me thinking about managing roots and what's going on below ground, and now expand that to not only the roots but the biology, the things we can't even see physically, and how everything we do impacts them. Today, these networks of other producers, I've never invented anything in my life. I don't even have a lot of original ideas, but when I see something working, I'm pretty good at stealing it, bringing it back, and making it work. And so, you know,
time-honored tradition.
Yes, John Deere, you know, they're living proof of that, right? Sorry.
We'll let our John Deere friends ask questions in a minute.
One of the things I enjoy most about farming is reaching out, going to meetings, finding other producers who are really sharp and doing something really well. I'm a pilot. I love a good excuse to fly anywhere, go to their place, see what they're doing, you know, try and see what we can bring back. And now, of course, we've got the internet, and that's good and bad. There's a lot of great things out there. There's information at your fingertips, whether you're in your farm office or whether you're with your iPad in the tractor on auto track, auto steer going through the field. It's all out there. The problem there is you've got to be able to filter a lot of that. There's a lot of junk out there too. So there's an important skill set that I think if we're going to ask our kids to be techies and go out in the information age and get this information, we need to make sure we teach them the critical thinking skills to separate the chaff from the good stuff. But all those things, mostly it's human interaction that's helping me. And I've had, you know, I'm 20 minutes from Purdue University, and I make a lot of jokes. I'm an IU grad, about IU, Purdue, and occasionally poke fun at some of the findings that come out of the land grant system. But in honesty, there's a lot of great people there, Jane and some of her colleagues that I've worked with that have helped me, a guy who's not very smart when it comes to chemistry and some of these things, understand physically what's going on so I can think through those processes, and that's been a big help too.
Well, I want to continue to drill down on the information thing, but Jared, do you have something you want to add to this before we?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a visual image of this. Dan and I were talking about this at lunch, but it's a concept that I've been working with on producers. If you look at the upper foot of soil in a really healthy organic, high organic matter soil, about 4%, we have the equivalent of 2 African elephants living underneath that soil surface in the upper foot. And if you had 2 African elephants per acre walking around your farm, the first thought you'd have every morning is, how are you going to feed those elephants? And if you had that same thought about that, all of that biology underneath your soil surface, and saying, if you woke up every morning thinking, how am I going to feed these stupid elephants, you know? If you've got to think about it from that standpoint, then you're going to say, I'm going to think about organic matter, I'm going to think about this residue, because they're eating roots constantly. And so I really focused on just how do we begin to think about management of the soil biological system, and looking differently at our soil system, not from a physics perspective, not from a chemistry perspective. Start with the biology, because a healthy biological soil also will save itself in terms of the aeration problem, the nutrient cycling problem, a number of different things that happen from that. So I think that once we start thinking about that way, then a lot of the other things that change within our soil. But unfortunately, soil biology is the last thing we think about. We want to manipulate soil mechanically to achieve a certain structure. We want to manipulate it chemically to achieve a certain goal. We don't think about letting biology do all our work for us. And I think some of that, and I give another talk on just the arrogance of mankind, or humankind, about how we've manipulated our soil to achieve the goals that we want, in reality not working, letting the soil do what it really is designed to do. Going back to the fence row. If you look at what the fence row can do for us, I mean, it's a perfect example, and I'll give you a fence row example. We have harvested yields out of a fence row, simulated fence row, this year of 290 bushels in central Iowa. Wow. That tells you what you can do when you think about a high organic matter soil, lots of water holding capacity, a lot of nutrients, everything else in there. If you can do 290 in a year like this, think what you can do in a good year. You know, so that says that there's a lot of undiscovered secrets in this soil that we better start figuring out, because, as Jim pointed out, we don't always have 6 inches of soil uniformly distributed around the world. And it's getting less than that. So.
Well, you've brought up some interesting numbers as well as given me new thoughts about the elephant in the room.
That's really the elephant in the room story.
Yes, yeah. So let's get back to the subject of communication, whether it's Bill Richardson's number about an extra $2,000 or your $40 to $50 an acre, or you know,
2 elephants.
Your 2 elephants. How do we get this information out to people? I mean, I'm kind of a numbers person. If you told me that I was going to, you know, even this example about raising 290 bushel of corn, those things and the numbers would, I think they'd get people's attention. But why aren't they? I mean, are we not using the right kinds of tools? Or are we not giving the right kinds of messages? What is it?
Let me give you one other story on this. We started working with Jim Kinsella back in 1990, 89, 90, something like this. And we'd been evaluating the no-till systems. And one of the very interesting comments that I'll never forget this, and as Jim and his band of no-tillers at that time said to me, "Why are you doing Me Too research?" And I said, "What are you talking about, Jim?" He says, "All you guys are studying is how does our system work." He says, "We know it works. What we really want you working on is the next thing that we haven't thought about yet." I'm going, you know how long I wake at night, like trying to keep ahead of the most inventive farmers around the world, you know? But that's what we got to start, is we got to think about these things from a much more imaginative perspective than what we're doing. Because we often do confirmatory stuff about what some of the best farmers like Dan, some of the rest of them have already in their place. We need to be thinking way beyond that and how these pieces come together.
And how's that going to happen? What would it look like?
I'll leave it to these guys.
Well,
I got to be careful here. It really comes down to motivation and what motivates people to seek out the information. And I think we understand that the people like Dan DeSutter are highly motivated. Dan, you're going to do it just because that's who you are.
Just because some folks that produced said it wouldn't work.
That's a good point. We have a group of people who will do better things in conservation if there is some incentive to it. And then we have some folks that say, doesn't mean anything to me, and they won't do anything. And I think the issue in all of that is how do you change the behavior? And of course, the first group, we don't need to change the behavior much except just excite them even more and then clone them. In fact, I asked a question a couple of weeks ago in California in an agricultural setting, and it was, and I want to take us maybe to a challenge that we have in agriculture that perhaps many in this room don't sense, or if you sense it, you don't really want to deal with it. But that is, there's a significant group of individuals out there who really want to change the dynamics of agriculture as we're talking about completely. And I asked the question, if I could take, or we could take, those who are the best of the best, and then select them one time, more time for the absolute best, and you could do a little bit of genetic engineering or cloning or something, and you could spread that then across the entire scope of agriculture, would that get us there? And the answer I got was, well, it'd be helpful, but we still have an awful lot more work to do because agriculture is destroying the environment. And so what I'm looking for are those motivators. And if you think about the broad public and where the messages are at right now, if you aren't motivated to do better based upon that anecdote, that there's a public out there that doesn't think you're doing very well, then we probably ought to check ourselves out here a little bit. So I'm looking for the motivators that's going to continue to push all of us towards just performing better, because the ultimate motivator will be, well, we're just going to tell you how to do it. Okay? And the I'm going to tell you how to do it system we know, coming from presumably government, usually isn't a desirable result.
Fred, you've been in the business of collecting data and working with people who want to show continuous improvement. Give us your thoughts on what we can do to improve information and bring more people into the fold.
Well, first, I've enjoyed the conversation here and dissertation and all on soil health, because it's not something that I get the benefit of hearing all the time. And my takeaway is very simple. This is table stakes. So this is a have-to situation right here. I would like to go ahead and take it on up 50,000 feet, maybe a little bit, and say, if you ask the question, let's go back to the question of what's the greatest single challenge to conservation and sustainability. It's just the fact that we're going to add 2 to 3 billion people. Mm-hmm. But there's another challenge, and some challenges you just can't go out and tackle that challenge. That's a fact. It's not something you can eliminate. We're not going to eliminate that. Another challenge that we have right now, and this is moreover a personal opinion, I expressed it to Jim earlier, and I am personally convinced that we are at a moment in time where a step change has to occur. What got us here will not necessarily get us to where we need to be in the future. Our political system is short-sighted both regionally and internationally. There's no, if you look at the political systems that are out there, there is no motivation to do anything today that will get me unelected, even if it's for the benefit of your grandchildren. The system doesn't address that. It's a very short-sighted system. Our financial system, our economic system is the very same way. So if we're talking in this room about tackling problems that are designed to make the life of our children, grandchildren, and so forth, so that they can enjoy the benefits we have, then we have to realize we have to find another way, like Jurassic Park. Life has to find another way. Left to our own devices, I'm convinced that if we wait until the economic system comes back and rewards us accordingly, or, to Jim's point, we hit that point of regulation that's so draconian that we will all hate that environment, or we wait until it is politically correct to take some action, which will mean we will hit a point in time to where it's so obvious to everybody that we have a serious problem here, then at that point in time, will we have passed the proverbial tipping point? When we have a crisis, if we have a Katrina or something of this nature, we can go and fix it. But what we have is a bit of a crisis in progress here. And at what point in time do we get to where the fix is going to be so difficult and so challenging that it is going to be so painful? We already know that countries like China have chosen other very draconian routes to limit some of their demand. That is not consistent with our way of thinking. So to stop right there and say, okay, that's our biggest challenge, I'll take it one step further. I don't think it's government. I don't think it's politics. I think it is a partnership of the entire supply and value chain. I'm spending my retirement time now. I'm working for an organization that's made up of input people, growers, every crop that we represent. We have all the grower organizations all the way through to the Walmarts. There is no one entity, political or economic, that can drive this. I will also say, in fairness, is a very small community of people around the world that are actually focused on this. There are 7 billion of us on this planet, but I can tell you I talk to probably at least half of the people that are really bought in and understand and have done the math, and they see the problem. There is not a big enough community of awareness that is out there today. So, if it's not going to be your government, and I will also tell you when it comes to the big crops that we're talking about here, the people downstream are not going to pay you a premium, and they don't have leverage over you in most cases. And I've had too many growers tell me, if you don't pay me a premium, or you don't lower my cost, or you don't have leverage over me by restricting market access, I'm not doing anything. So that means you have to find another way. And you have to come up with a value proposition that the grower can actually embrace and say, well, I am getting rewarded. And that value proposition has to be developed by the entire supply chain, because everybody has to contribute to this. Our approach is based on continuous improvement and education, providing the tools and the data that farmers can make their own decisions. One of the things I learned in 1976, the first time I ran a grain elevator and got in this business, was you don't charge the farm gate. You have to be invited in. You do not get to come in whenever you want to come in. And there has to be a reason that you're there. So I'm convinced that at this point in time, we are tracking toward a program to provide information they've not had before so they can make their own decisions. Growers don't want to be dictated to. They want to make their own call, and they will. There's another thing about the downstream people, the Walmarts and General Mills and others of the world that are part of our organization. And I say to them, and they agree, if you leave it in the hands of the growers to make these decisions, and what you're doing is spending your time and money helping develop tools so they can see into their own operations better, so they can see what their choices are, trust them to make those investments. They've spent the last 4 decades making those investments when technology has come along, and they will make them again, just like you will invest in new plants and new processes. And so I can tell you that the largest companies in the world are embracing that. And they're looking to come together. The organization I'm with has been together for 6 years, about 45 organizations, the largest in the world, from NGOs to grower groups to food processors, you name it. And it is a testament that it can be done. And I will also say that NRCS is a tremendous partner for us. There was a comment made earlier, and I think Bruce might have made it, about, you know, the private sector and the public, and, you know, I think he said politics gets in the way and is a problem. But there's a place for government. We were 3 years into this program I'm with, and I remember out in a meeting in Colorado saying, who's missing at the table now that we've got to this point? Well, it was the role of government, but not a traditional role. It is a new role, a collaborative role. And so that's really, for me, the biggest obstacle is accepting the fact that the old system is not going to appropriately get us where we need to go in the future. And there are a lot of right-minded people. How do you communicate that out? That is a wonderful question, and we are actually, was in this room for the last 2 days with our plenary. We have 2 meetings a year with the entire group, and that's exactly what we'll be focusing on in 2013, is how do you get an outreach program to get the word out there to people of what's available, what needs to be done, with the entire supply chain coordinated, not just one entity, because if it's one entity, then people think that there's a self-interest involved, and they're suspicious and cynical. We have to get past that.
Absolutely. Well, we've got lots more questions that we could ask here, but it's time for all of you to ask your questions. And we have our first one here with David. Can you identify yourself, please?
Dave Miller, Iowa Farm Bureau. Being a person who got rid of his moldboard plow in 1972 on about a 500-acre farm, one of my concerns is, particularly as we look to the future, is that the technology of the future is not scale neutral. Installing terraces, installing grass waterways, no-till, we're pretty much scale neutral. I could have a 4-row no-till planter, a 6-row, 8-row. The scale wasn't a barrier. I'm not even close to being able to go to precision agriculture. The scale of either the equipment that it's coming on, does anybody even make a precision planter less than 16 rows? And or how many acres do you need to cover it? I think may be the biggest challenge. In Iowa, we've done some work on the FSA database. There's 81,000 farmer plus a few, but there's 81,700 farmers in Iowa that get an FSA payment. 83% of them are less than 500 acres. I suspect there are probably less than 5% of the less than 500 acres that can adopt the new technology. So how do we take the new technology and make it available at a scale, or do you lose 95% of your population of being in support of where you're going?
Very good question. Dan, you want to kick off?
You know, I guess what I would say to that is we farm 4,300 acres. There are lots larger farms around us. And the way I see maintaining our independence is through interdependence. And what I mean by that is I've got a friend that we own a sprayer together. And neither one of us could probably justify this particular sprayer on our own, but together we can go out and buy the state-of-the-art sprayer and it's cost effective. And so what I'm suggesting is that maybe you collaborate with neighbors and other like-minded folks in your area, and maybe one guy has a planter, one guy has a sprayer, however you want to work it, but there is a way. The other thing I would say is that I don't know if I buy that you can't make smaller equipment do a lot of things we need to do. There's not a piece of equipment we have on the farm today that we don't bring in the shop, pretty much tear down and rebuild the way we want it. And it doesn't matter whether it's 2 rows or 32 rows, you can do that. The question of economics and making it affordable, obviously, if you're not going to farm more acres yourself and you want to have all these gadgets, then you're going to have to find someone else to help you distribute them over that cost over more acres.
Any other responses, react?
No, I like it was a farm management question, a farm management solution, and to me it is a farm management issue, and I like the answer. That's where I go.
Jim.
I really enjoyed this panel. Of course, Dan, I can't anticipate what you're going to say, and you get me excited every time you talk about what you're doing. and I believe wholeheartedly in letting the biological system work. But here is my concern, and I also like where you're headed with this alliance idea. But when you start looking at trying to do something on a watershed scale and have impact, I worry about we're going to be at that tipping bucket before we can have the impact at the watershed scale. In other words, we've got adopters like you. We don't have nearly enough. And when I look out at farmers in my community, too many of them are still still able to mine the system, pay high cash rents, add more acres, and do more of the same. And my concern is, how can we do enough good, sustainable conservation on a large enough scale quick enough? And Jim, you kind of touched on, I wanted to go a little bit further. You thought it might sort itself out. I don't know if you want to go a little deeper into that, but I think we've got to, I'm concerned about how quickly we scale up to get to that level.
I think Bill and Bruce started to go down that road in a prior panel, and I really think that, and one of the reasons why I focused on organic matter is that we can write into a contract. It's a function of educating the landowners. If you're a farmer and you own land, you ought to be pretty receptive to this argument. Why is Iowa farmland worth $12,000 and southern Indiana it's only worth $6,000? It's basically organic matter. We have a story we can tell that's compelling, that pays money in real time, and it's an oversimplification. And this in and of itself, I'm glad you and your folks are doing the work you're doing, because I think you're right that we don't have the systems in place to solve this, but I do think that this is a line of thinking we can pursue in the here and now, and it's only limited by our ability to help people understand the mechanics of what we're talking about.
When I heard you say that, you know what came to my mind? We've had soil conservation compliance. Maybe we need to have organic matter compliance.
You know, I have farms that I farm today because of what we do, not in spite of it. Okay, I mean, I have landlords who have approached me. You know, one of the things I'm proudest of in my farming career is I've never solicited a farm away from someone else. The growth that we've had since I became involved, that my dad had 800 acres to 4,300, has been 100% either stuff that I've purchased or that others have come and said, you know what, I like the way you're doing that. Are you interested in my farm? I think that's a positive story we can tell. For every big wheel cash renter out there, there's a competent farmer in that neighborhood that if that landlord understood what this guy's doing to their farm and what this guy could do for it, they would make a change. And I don't think it takes that much time, but education is the vital first step in that, to get people to understand.
Could I do a follow-on to that? We have, again, if you're not familiar with the work of Field to Market, I invite you to go to the website, but we do pilots, basically, and we'll get groups of 20, 50 farmers together to all participate in the utilization of the tools. And we do them in a variety of ways, but we do them in watersheds as well. And usually those projects are led by World Wildlife Fund or the Nature Conservancy in concert with Coca-Cola and a group of growers, or NRCS and so forth. We're working on one now. I think it a little bit applies to what you're saying. At least I attended a meeting, and we're looking at how to go forward. If you look at the western part of Lake Erie and the algae blooms that are up there and the phosphorus problems that are there, and then someone had made a comment earlier about climate change and why did this happen? It's because there were some dissolved elements in the soil, and we had uncharacteristically heavy rains, which picked them up, and eventually, you know, you get this algae bloom. And whereas Lake Erie was at one point in time declared dead, there's a real concern that it'll get redeclared as dead. So what do you do about that? Well, the tool we want to apply, and we did it at a pawpaw at another watershed, and our friends at NRCS have identified 6 other watersheds we're going to do this at, is you apply the tool. The farmers then get to see how their outputs stack up against each other, anonymously, if you will. I mean, they don't see the other people's data, but they see the comparative output. It's a comparative analysis approach. Second step is to take a look under the hood and see what practices are causing these changes in outputs. So you get 2 things. You get a grower who gets an analysis of their potential for change that could put more money in their pocket and also be more environmentally and socially responsible. The way I'm thinking now is that's a win. And of course, because it's predicated upon sustainability, it also automatically addresses some of these issues, such as this residual problem in the soil. My latest thinking is that they may also discover the differentiation between what is economic for a grower and what is not. Now, 10 or 12 years ago, it was the acceptance of this triple bottom line that was social, environmental, and economic. That's what got people to the table. When the environmental community said, I understand your dilemma, you can't do anything unless you can satisfy your shareholders, it's the system we live in. Then the system, the capitalists, the entrepreneurs, the business people sit down and go, well, if you understand my problem, well, we can talk. And that's how it started. And it happened during the greenhouse gas global warming first debate, and it was a real win-win because, and I was one of them, that's how I got in this. Gee, if I just cut down on my energy consumption and become more efficient at my plants, I'll reduce my greenhouse gases. I might not have to pay a penalty, because at that point in time we thought we might. And, well, sure, I'm on board. And then that's how this whole thing really started to roll. The legislation didn't pass, but it continued. So, but at a point in time, what do you do if the economic leg is not there for an individual grower? What if these climate changes are going to be so draconian that you're going to have to do some hydraulic investments out there? You're going to have to do something different with the water. Well, then I think our efforts may differentiate between what can be done on the farm that makes sense according to the triple bottom line and what's in the public domain out here. But if in the public domain you decide, well, if it's not good for the farmer, it's not going to happen, so we'll just declare Lake Erie dead, I think most of the people that are affected by that lake and all the surrounding reverberating benefits, I think they'll be willing to spend a few bucks to try and solve that problem. So that's the type of thing we're actually working on. And I don't know if it helps to answer the question, but this is, and we could not have had these discussions 2 years ago, by the way. This has been such a learning curve. People have tried things, have failed, and they're getting to this, lifting of the veil, if you will. So, my 2 cents.
Jim, you baited me with a question. I can't help but respond because you've hit at the very essence of the question that's been asked, I suppose, maybe since the early days of soil conservation. How do you get these things accomplished with farmers at the ground level? And I've been sitting here thinking, do we have anything new to say? I don't know. But I do know that the model that Dan shared with Dave Swaim and an individual who took really personal responsibility for about a half of 2 counties, right, Dan, approximately?
Oh, there's a larger geographic dispersion, but a smaller concentration.
Yes.
The equivalent of that.
But he took personal responsibility, and he simply was an information gatherer, seeker. And he went out and he brought the information back to all these farmers, and we did change the culture of farming in that locale. Made a difference. And if we could somehow get that duplicated across the landscape, I think that would be beneficial. The second thing that came to mind sitting here, and it goes back to, it was mentioned earlier, Bill, I think you went over to Australia on the mission. I couldn't go, but I sent a delegation to Australia to take a look at this concept called land care. Now, for all of the things that we want to talk about land care, we really looked very deeply into it and actually tried to bring it back to the United States. We didn't do so well out of the chute on the first one. That implies there could be a second one if there's any leadership here. But if you look at the essence of what they did, they put environment conservation at the center of the entire Australian society. It wasn't just about the farmers and the ranchers on their paddocks. It was about the entire culture. 83% of the Australian population knows about land care. They identified with it. They use land care as a logo in their advertising, the companies did. And I guess what I'm saying is we've got to figure out a way to elevate the conversation in a way that we simply haven't accomplished yet to this point in time. We're all trying. Those of you sitting in this room are daily trying to get this there. We don't have enough partners, okay? And so we got to have something. And maybe the land care concept, we've been asked, are we going to try it again? I don't know. Took a lot of energy, but I'll throw that out. If there's any leadership here that wants to take that one on, why, we should meet.
Obviously, another point for further discussion. We've got at least 4 questions pending here. This gentleman, and then one over here, and Kurt and Paul. Don?
Thank you. My name's Don McCabe. I'm a farmer from southwestern Ontario and president of the Soil Conservation Council of Canada, and I thank the panel for their insights. But I do have to differ on one small issue here, and I think that regardless, Canadian farmers are equal to Chilean farmers, Chinese farmers, Czechoslovakian farmers, I don't care, because my definition of a farmer, I hope, would meet with Dan's approval from the perspective that farmers are managers of carbon and nitrogen cycles with the interception of the water cycle to produce starch, oil, and fiber while providing animal habitat, improving air quality, improving soil quality, improving water quality. I just want to get paid for something. So my statement back to the issue of communication here, I've now got to insert a commercial because I'm very proud to be a part of CASA, and you all in this room have the opportunity to step up to the plate in June 2014 at the 6th World Congress on Conservation Agriculture to spread this message. And in order to make that happen, get your checkbook out before then and talk to Karen.
And you have a question?
But my question is, first of all, make sure you got the check. But the real question here is, you can always tell a farmer, but not much. And the issue becomes down to, I am very concerned about what's been alluded to up here on the issue of policy. And yes, I'm a Canadian farmer, but your U.S. Farm Bill, I sell at Chicago. I have a little thing called basis. It corrects for U.S. exchange, but transportation's the same. So where do you want to take U.S. farm policy? Where do you want to take UN policy? What's going to happen with this bioeconomy? I personally believe we can afford to remove some of the residues because it's the roots that I want. The other stuff's just going back off in the air anyhow, and I can't plant quick enough in my colder habitat. But how are we going to find the balances here on the policies that are needed to make politicians electable versus UN demands that are unrealistic versus a bioeconomy that we need, and then let's just throw in a sweetener of environmental goods and services?
Well, Don, that was quite a basket there of very good questions, and a lot of them that may be too lengthy for all of us to get our hands around. But let's ask the Farm Bill question, because it was one that we were going to discuss anyway, and we don't have one, obviously, in the United States. The current one has expired. When the last Farm Bill expired, nobody seemed to notice, but this is a year divisible by 4. What would you like to see in a Farm Bill that would address the future of conservation?
Conservation compliance to start.
You know, this, again, it'll never be this simple, but a good start is what these gentlemen spoke about earlier, is tying crop insurance eligibility to conservation compliance. Because right now, crop insurance is what drives a lot of economic decisions on the farm. Crop insurance is what allows large farmers to go out and bid X for land knowing they've got this backstop. Take that away, and they've got a whole new realm of risk management to engage in. I'm one that says that I would rather have less invasion from the government here. I think if we're going to do something for farmers, though, crop insurance and CSP-like environmental incentives are what we really want to see. CSP, I say CSP-like because CSP is so extraordinarily burdensome, and the bureaucracy behind it is, I'm going to use the word absurd, that it has issues. But that concept of if we're going to sell this to the public and expect the 98% of the American public to continue to be willing to send some money down to agriculture, which, by the way, is one of the thriving segments right now, we've got to give them an incentive. And, you know, we've got to be able to show them we're going to give you something for this. And doing some environmental things and conservation compliance is a small price to pay.
Mm-hmm. Larry, and we'll let Bill and Bruce respond over cocktails. So, Larry?
Their panel's done.
World of experience and opinions. I think from my perspective, it is the notion of using the best available science to target the conservation to the best places and let that guide our programs. And then I totally agree with linking compliance with crop insurance and then supporting the agency and their staff to then go implement it so that we don't have just paper compliance, we have real compliance and support the agency to really do their job.
Okay. Jerry, real quick.
Yeah, I have to put in a plug. ARS, we just launched a program that's called Long-Term Agroecological Research. And it's now, you know, we're way beyond the watershed. We manage the one that's called the Upper Mississippi River. So we're going to take Wisconsin, parts of all of Iowa, Minnesota, and everything else, anything that flows in the upper part of the Mississippi, and basically begin to do exactly what you're talking about. How do you begin to think about managing watersheds as subsets within that, but how do you look at the larger scale and saying what's the productivity of that, how do you improve the quality of that, how do you look at environmental goods and services coming out of that? It is going to tax science to be able to start thinking about how we bring together those pieces. But we launched 10 of them this fall. And it'll be interesting for you all to watch. A, how we succeed, or B, how we fail. But it will be a science experiment as we go forward, saying, how do we really address these at a scale that will now have an impact on that hypoxia problem in the Gulf of Mexico? How will it have an impact on an economic sector that'll be big enough for people to realize? So.
Good point.
I'm going to make a point real quick that money from the federal sector is, the future of it is bleak, folks, very bleak.
That's a good point. This gentleman has been so patient. Jerry.
Yes. There's one subject that we talked, kind of missed out on, I think, and that is the economics. We talked about a lot of good things the farmers should be doing. We had 4 farmers on the panel here who are in business, and they're in business for one reason, they're still in business because they're making a profit. And that's the bottom line with this farmer. His decisions are made upon, can I make a profit, can I not? Assuming the things we said here today and we heard about are good and they're economically sound, how do we get that message to the farmer so that's the decision he makes? I think that's the real challenge we have. And I'd like to hear some response to that.
How do we get the economic message out? Larry.
Well, you know, I think back to maybe 30 years ago when CTIC started, where, you know, we got the message out about conservation tillage and the technology and how to do that. And we maybe need to go back and revisit some of the lessons learned there. And all of us as a community, the industry, the NGOs, the government agencies, you know, soil and water districts, all of us get on a message and really go to the field and work that message, because I don't think we've had anything like that for a few decades. Right. And I think, you know, since the conservation tillage, you know, crusade, whatever you want to call it, then compliance and things like that, but we haven't had anything really to really push as a team out here together.
Good point about possibility of a campaign. Kurt.
You know, one follow-up to that real quick is I'm a little disturbed that when I see guys coming out of ag school coming back to the farm right now, you would expect that they might have an understanding of this. Not even close. So I think one thing we could do is we all need to look at the curriculum and what they're being taught in school and make sure that for that next generation that's coming out of college that's studying ag or anything related to it, that they understand a few of these key concepts. It's really kind of sad that they don't have that.
So We'll start with the education system. Kurt, and then Raymond.
Kurt Lawton, editor of Corn and Soybean Digest magazine, and we're obviously very passionate about conservation tillage and all that. One of the things we wrestle with, and I think we've talked a little bit about it, dealing with the economics, and I want to drill down just briefly on, you know, is there a way that we can tie soil health to land value? And can that really have an impact on landlords and on people who are paying exorbitant cash rents? And I just wanted you guys to talk a little bit about that.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
I mean, that was the whole concept of the organic matter thing. Is that something we can measure?
How do we do it, though? I mean, I know the answer is yes.
Take
You
a soil.
do it.
Yeah.
You write corn soybean digest. I mean, what do farmers read in terms of how you get the message there? Now, the message.
Well, this year, I mean, if low organic matter soils in Iowa probably averaged less than 100 bushels, good organic matter soils averaged 230 in a lot of cases. I mean, there's 130 bushels at $7, you know, that's the difference between profit and loss. Organic matter paid this year in spades.
So he brings up a good point, though. When's the last time you saw a land for sale, organic matter X?
Never.
I mean, or when's the last time a farm manager is trying for cash rent? Not that we have any in the room. Is a part of the description.
When's the last time you asked an absentee landlord, what's the organic matter on your farm? And they
Wouldn't have any idea. They wouldn't.
But I think there are opportunities because the really good soil in Iowa is going for 16,000 plus, and I think that you can start tying it to some of this.
People already innately understand this. Yeah. They just they see black dirt and they look at gray clay and they know this is more productive. They don't know why. We need to make that connection for them.
Is it fair to say that?
Yes, I'd like to comment on crop insurance just a moment. But
well, if we can finish Fred's comment, and then Raymond, you get the last question.
Well, thank you.
Is it fair to say then that land trades now, I mean, based on its history, I mean, so how it has been productive. The whole issue is to get the science involved to say there is opportunity to optimize this land, and here are the practice changes that if you put in place will generate a higher organic value, which will translate into X differential on, and so therefore, it's not just I can sell it for more, somebody has to make that investment. If I were a landowner and I were sitting in Chicago or New York, I would want to go find me somebody out there who would make my land, the next time I put it up for rent, take this on. And I might even go, if I do the math and it works out and I'm a businessman, I might do a little cost sharing here to get this going.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry to have to cut off some of the questioning, but we are out of time. And Raymond, you get the last question.
Thank you. My comment would be about crop insurance, and my comment is negative. In the community that I'm from and surrounding for many miles, people really haven't utilized crop insurance more than one time in 10 years, even though they have purchased it. So crop insurance is not nearly the assistance to them as the money that I realize we can't get anymore that we have drawn all these years. But I also want to comment that some people feel like that the return of money on crop insurance from the person loaning that money is 30%. All right. The people loaning that money in some areas are also the same people that are loaning their producer money to make the crop. So the producer is borrowing money to make the crop, and if he doesn't make the crop, the person making the loan is making a 30% profit. But let me repeat, my main statement is that crop insurance is not utilized that much in some communities. People may purchase it, but that's only as a safeguard, and they only collect maybe once out of every 10 years or so.
And what part of the country are you from?
Arkansas.
Arkansas.
The primary purpose for that is, and I know we're wasting it, but the primary purpose is we have water. The crop failures that I think went on in 2012 in north of here went on because those people do not have water.
Do you think that we as a country said, okay, no more disaster programs. We're never going to have another disaster program. We're going to do this insurance thing. We're going to subsidize that to whatever level we can afford, which probably isn't going to be much the way we're going. Do you think then that people would feel differently? I mean, there's a perception now that anytime a disaster comes along, well, Congress will pass a disaster bill. Why do I need to worry about insurance?
More than perception, it's reality.
Well,
Yes.
Well, and especially in many parts of the South where there's not been a historical investment in crop insurance and policies that haven't been as workable as some people would have liked. But to your point, you're suggesting that crop insurance and conservation compliance would not be a good policy path forward. Is that correct? Because you don't see an incentive of linking the two?
Well, we see where other people in the United States are getting a little bit of an advantage where it's not available to us because in those particular instances we don't utilize that.
Right.
I'll tell you what, I would pay your crop insurance premiums if I can have your water.
Well, I think that's a good way to end. I hope you've enjoyed this panel as much as I've enjoyed moderating it. It was a great panel.